High-speed police chases can end fast, but not always the way people think. Behind the sirens and screeching tires are real moments where lives are lost in brutal ways. In this video, we'll uncover 5 disturbing true stories of police pursuits that turned deadly. Cases filled with chaos, shocking twists, and tragic endings. These are not movie scenes, but real events that show how one chase can change everything forever. It was November 29, 2017 in Evansville, Indiana. 23-year-old Janie Carter, 26-year-old Terrence Barker, and their 2 children, 2-year-old Princess and 7-month-old Prince, had just left Janie's mother's house. Jenny buckled her children into their car seats in the back of the family's 2003 PT Cruiser. She kissed them before getting into the driver's seat. Terrence sat beside her in the passenger seat. They had only lived in this neighborhood for about a week. Janie wanted a fresh start, hoping her family could finally be in a safer home before Christmas. But just blocks away, everything changed. Around 7 p.m., Evansville police spotted a black 2017 Chevy Impala parked near Bayard Park Drive. A quick check of the license plate showed it belonged to another car. As officers approached to check the VIN, 2 men suddenly jumped back in and sped away. The driver was Frederick McFarland. Police followed, the chase covering only half a mile. But in that short distance, the Impala reached 74 miles per hour. At the intersection of Monroe Avenue and Linwood Avenue, McFarland blew through a stop sign. At that same moment, Janie's PT Cruiser crossed the intersection. The impact was violent. McFarland's car slammed into the PT Cruiser, sending it into a tree. The vehicle twisted around the trunk, crushed beyond recognition. 7-month-old Prince was thrown from the car. 2-year-old Princess stayed strapped in her seat. Terrence absorbed the worst of the crash, while Janie, seriously hurt, was barely conscious. Across the street, a neighbor named Tanisha Givens heard the collision and ran outside. She saw the mangled PT Cruiser against the tree. Police arrived quickly, some mistaking it for McFarland's car. With weapons drawn, they shouted orders, until a woman's voice cried from inside, "My baby, my baby." The scene was devastating. Prince was pronounced dead at the site. Princess was rushed to the hospital but passed away soon after. Terrence was unconscious with severe head injuries and died later. Janie, who was pregnant at the time, was the only survivor. Police took McFarland into custody. Nearly 3 years later, in 2020, he pleaded guilty to resisting law enforcement and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Janie later filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Evansville, arguing the pursuit should have been called off. Her lawyer, Scott Weathers, said officers chased too long over something minor, a false plate. McFarland was never charged with using false plates or with stealing the car. In 2022, the city settled with Janie for $1.75 million through its insurance carrier. Officials called it a compromise, not an admission of guilt, but recognition of her loss. Janie's physical injuries healed, but she developed PTSD and could barely speak in court. She described Princess as full of energy and Prince as always smiling. She remembered strapping them in and kissing them that night, saying she never saw the other car coming. At the time, Janie was 11 weeks pregnant. She later gave birth to a girl she named Miracle, believing survival itself was a sign. She later had a son, Legend. Janie's mother, Sarah Johnson, said the new children were blessings but could never replace the 2 lost. The crash shook the community. People gathered at the scarred tree where flowers and toys piled up. Janie's friend, Taylor Rustin, said, "A mother shouldn't have to bury her babies right before the holidays." McFarland's passenger was never identified. At the time, McFarland faced unrelated charges for drug activity and carrying a handgun without a license. Police reviewed their pursuit policy, saying no rules were broken, but the tragedy raised questions about the dangers of high-speed chases, especially when innocent families are caught in the middle. Janie had done everything right, buckled her children in and driven carefully. But in seconds, her life was torn apart by a chase that began with a simple plate check and ended with 3 lives lost and a family changed forever. It was just after 6:30 in the morning on a rural stretch of U.S. Highway 57 near Batesville, Texas. The sun was barely up and most locals were starting their day. But on this morning in 2023, that quiet road became the site of one of the deadliest crashes in recent Texas history. Among the 8 people who lost their lives were Jose Lerma, 67 years old, and his wife Isabel, 65 years old. They were from Dalton, Georgia, and had been married for nearly 49 years. The couple was driving south to Mexico, most likely for a personal or family visit. Less than an hour before the crash, Isabel had even posted a birthday message to a friend online, but within minutes their lives would end on that highway. At the same time, a 21-year-old man from Houston was driving a white 2009 Honda Civic with 5 passengers. Several of them, later identified as Honduran citizens, were believed to be in the country without legal documents. Law enforcement would later confirm that the car was being used in a smuggling attempt. When a Zavala County Sheriff's deputy tried to pull him over, the driver refused to stop. Instead, he sped away, starting a high-speed pursuit down the 2-lane highway. Witnesses said the Honda swerved recklessly, trying to escape. These kinds of chases are common in southern Texas, and many have ended in deadly crashes. The driver then tried to pass an 18-wheeler truck in a no-passing zone. He may have panicked or thought he could make it. What he didn't see was the Chevrolet Equinox heading toward him. Inside that SUV were Jose and Isabel. In an instant, the two cars collided head-on. The Equinox burst into flames immediately, leaving Jose and Isabel with no chance to escape. Both died at the scene. The Honda was destroyed. Twisted metal scattered across the road. All 6 inside, including the driver, were also killed. Photos later showed the devastation. The Equinox was charred beyond recognition, and the Civic was torn apart by the impact. Texas DPS spokesperson Lieutenant Chris Olivares confirmed that the driver was fleeing deputies during a smuggling attempt when he struck the SUV, killing both innocent victims and everyone in his car. Back in Georgia, the Lerma family was heartbroken. Their son Jairo shared the news online and created a fundraiser to cover funeral costs. He wrote that the loss had left their hearts and souls sad. The couple had been only 1 month away from celebrating their 49th wedding anniversary. By that Friday, the fundraiser had brought in more than $7,000, with hundreds of people offering support. This was the deadliest migrant-related vehicle crash in the United States since March 2021, when 13 people died in Holtville, California, after an overloaded SUV collided with a semi-truck. In Texas alone, officials reported more than 500 high-speed pursuits in El Paso that year, many of them reaching over 100 miles per hour. The rising number of crashes has fueled debate. Law enforcement argues that stopping smugglers is necessary, but critics say the chases put innocent lives at risk. Between 2010 and mid-2023, the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas documented 106 deaths linked to Border Patrol pursuits, with the number sharply rising after 2020. In January, U.S. Customs and Border Protection introduced a new pursuit policy. Officers were instructed to weigh the risk to the public before continuing a chase. But Texas DPS Director Steve McCraw noted that even if officers pull back, drivers often continue at high speeds. Once the decision to flee is made, many don't slow down. That was the case on Highway 57. 1 man chose not to stop and 8 lives were lost. Jose and Isabel were not involved in anything illegal. They were simply making a trip together, unaware of what was coming toward them. Nearly 5 decades of life as a couple ended in seconds, leaving behind children, grandchildren, and a grieving community in Dalton. The investigation continues, but the reality is clear. 8 people are gone because of 1 reckless decision. And for those left behind, nothing will ever be the same. It was the morning of March 17, 2025, in Victorville, California. Deputy Hector Cuevas Jr., 36 years old, was on duty. He wasn't even scheduled to work that day, but had picked up an overtime shift. Cuevas had served 6 years with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. He was a husband, a father of 2, a brother, and once a high school football coach. Those who knew him described him as dedicated to his job, but even more devoted to his family. At around 10:58 a.m., deputies at the Victorville station spotted a stolen car near Mojave Drive and Amargosa Road. Behind the wheel was 22-year-old Ryan Dwayne Turner Jr. Turner already had a long criminal record. He had been arrested for stealing cars before and was known for running from police. He had recently been released early from county prison despite causing a crash during another police chase just the year before. When deputies tried to pull him over, Turner refused. He sped off, pushing his car over 100 miles per hour, running red lights and swerving through traffic. Cuevas joined the pursuit as it tore through the city. As Turner flew through the intersection of Seneca Road and Elevado Road, Cuevas approached from behind. At that moment, Cuevas' patrol SUV collided with a sedan driven by 23-year-old Marceline Demian, who had been making a left turn after her light turned green. Cuevas's vehicle then slammed into a light pole with such force that it split in half. The crash was devastating. Power was knocked out to nearby homes, and first responders rushed in. But Cuevas's injuries were too severe. He died at the scene. Demian survived with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. She later said she hadn't seen Cuevas coming and that his sirens weren't on. "If I had seen him, I would have stopped," she explained. Turner kept going. He abandoned the stolen car near Zuni Lane and ran. Deputies caught him soon after, though even in handcuffs he tried to run again. Prosecutors later confirmed he had been intoxicated during the chase. He was charged with causing death, evading police, and vehicle theft. Records showed Turner had been sentenced to 16 months in prison after his 2024 chase that injured a civilian, but served only 8 months because of early release laws. Many argued that if not for those laws, he would still have been behind bars. Deputy Cuevas had spent 3 years stationed in Victorville, after previously working for Upland Police. He grew up in Rialto, graduated from Carter High School, and lived in Fontana with his wife and children. Outside of work, he coached football at his old high school from 2015 to 2017, and also played in the National Public Safety Football League. Friends said he loved sports, but his greatest joy was being a father. The community's grief was clear. A long procession escorted his body down Interstate 15. Firefighters and first responders stood on overpasses in salute, while helicopters flew above. The next day, people gathered at the crash site, leaving flowers and candles. His sister Dominique tearfully said, "My brother was a good man, it wasn't in vain." His uncle Pedro Rivera added, "Putting on that uniform made him proud every day." On April 17th, a funeral service was held at the Ontario Convention Centre. Nearly 3,000 people attended. His children recorded a message that played during the service. "I love you, Daddy, you are my hero, and I'm going to miss you." The service ended with a rifle salute, a flyover, and taps. Afterward, Turner was formally charged with second-degree homicide, evading police, and vehicle theft. He pleaded not guilty, with another court date set for May 12th. Deputy Hector Cuevas Jr. wore badge number 3180. He leaves behind his wife Mia, his children Noel and Kiro, his parents, sister, and brother. His death shook not only Victorville but officers across California. What began as a stolen car report ended with the loss of a husband, a father, and a deputy who wasn't even supposed to be working that day. It was December 8, 2023, in San Diego, California. A family of 4 was inside a Honda sedan, driving on Interstate 805 near the 43rd Street off-ramp. In the back seat were 2 brothers, 8-year-old Malachi and 4-year-old Mason Orozco Romero. Their mother, Victoria, was in the front passenger seat, while a close family friend who also worked as the boys' nanny was behind the wheel. Nothing about this day seemed unusual. Then everything changed. A BMW traveling close to 100 miles per hour slammed into their car. The Honda spun down an embankment, crashed into a tree, and caught fire. Malachi and Mason lost their lives instantly. Their mother and nanny survived, but with serious injuries. The driver behind the crash was 20-year-old Angel Velasquez Salgado. He didn't have a license and was fleeing police in a high-speed chase. The pursuit began over something minor, a broken headlight. At first, officers only followed him after noticing his car on 32nd Street. When Salgado pulled into a driveway that didn't match the car's registration, they attempted a stop. Instead of stopping, he sped off. The chase stretched across freeways, northbound on Interstate 15, eastbound on State Route 94, then southbound on Interstate 805. Along the way, he ran stop signs, swerved through traffic, and at one point rear-ended another car, injuring an elderly woman. Witnesses say he reached about 100 miles per hour. It ended near the 43rd Street off-ramp. Salgado veered onto the shoulder and struck the Honda carrying Malachi, Mason, Victoria, and their nanny. The crash was devastating. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but the boys were already gone. Their mother was hospitalized in critical condition, and the nanny survived with severe injuries. Salgado fled on foot. He even removed his clothes, trying to hide in the neighborhood, but was caught just blocks away. At the time, he was not only unlicensed, but had also been involved in another police chase 7 months earlier. He was arrested and held on a $1 million bail, later revoked by prosecutors. Salgado first pleaded not guilty but changed his plea in August 2025 to guilty. He admitted to 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter, 2 counts of felony evading an officer causing serious bodily injury, 1 count of hit and run with injury, and 1 count of driving without a license. His sentencing is set for September 4, 2025, where he faces 30 years to life in prison. Malachi and Mason were remembered for their constant smiles. Their family had already suffered loss. Their father, Tyrone, had passed away the year before. Now, Victoria, who had lived with lupus since she was 11 years old, faced both physical injuries and the grief of losing her children. The boy's godmother, Brittany Fomavong, launched a fundraiser to cover funeral costs and medical bills. It has raised over $22,000 of its $40,000 goal. She wrote, "This tragedy isn't fair. I just appreciate everyone's love and support." The crash sparked debate across San Diego. Victoria and the nanny filed a wrongful death lawsuit, arguing police should have never chased Salgado over a broken headlight. Court-filing state officers should have stopped the pursuit when the risks became too high, especially during evening traffic. The city's Commission on Police Practices later recommended that pursuits only be allowed if lives are at immediate risk. But the San Diego Police Officers Association opposed the idea, saying it could limit their ability to catch people involved in serious crimes. The debate only grew when another officer was killed earlier that year after a pursuit was called off. What happened on December 8th wasn't just a crash. It was a chain of choices: a broken headlight, a driver refusing to stop, a decision to pursue, and finally a split-second impact at 100 miles per hour that ended 2 young lives. Malachi and Mason were sons, brothers, and children with their whole futures ahead of them. Now they are gone, leaving behind a grieving mother, a devastated nanny, and a community left asking questions that may never have answers. It was January 22, 2019 in Birmingham, United Kingdom. Holly Burke, a 28-year-old police community support officer, had just finished her day. She was off-duty driving her Ford Fiesta along Lordswood Road in the Harborne area. Within minutes, her life would be taken in a sudden and tragic way. That same night, at around 11:20 p.m., police officers on routine patrol in Erdington spotted a Renault Scenic speeding along the Aston Expressway. The driver was later identified as 42-year-old Darren Ogum. He was driving far above the speed limit. When officers tried to stop him, he refused, beginning a 14-minute chase across some of Birmingham's busiest roads. Ogum, unemployed and from Kings Norton, had no license, no insurance, and had used illegal substances just 2 hours earlier. Blood tests showed traces in his system at 23 times the legal limit. Despite this, he still decided to drive. The chase began in residential areas where Ogum reached speeds over 60 miles per hour in 30 zones. He then returned to the expressway, pushing his car to 105 miles per hour, weaving through traffic and overtaking on the inside. Police used a stinger device to stop him, but it failed. Ogum drove right over it. From there, the pursuit moved toward Birmingham city center. CCTV later showed him running red lights, driving into oncoming traffic, and speeding past City Hospital on Dudley Road at 70 miles per hour in 30 zones. At times, he was on the wrong side of the road, putting everyone in danger. By this point, he had covered over 12 miles. Ogum later claimed he panicked when he saw officers ahead and behind him. He said he was using his wife's car to pick up a friend from the hospital and did not want it seized. But his choice to run would soon have irreversible consequences. At about 11:30 p.m., just 120 yards before a major junction, Ogum was recorded driving between 73 and 83 miles per hour. Traffic lights at the intersection of Bearwood Road and Hagley Road turned green for Holly Burke. As she moved forward, Ogum ran the red light and slammed into the driver's side of her car. The impact was catastrophic. Emergency services arrived quickly. Paramedics found officers already giving CPR. They took over, but Holly's injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Ogum, who suffered only minor injuries, was arrested. He faced charges of causing death by dangerous driving, failing to stop, driving without a license or insurance, and driving under the influence. He pleaded guilty. At the time, Ogum had just been released from prison. His record stretched back to 1993 with 44 convictions. In 2001, he served 18 months in Panama for smuggling. In 2008, he was jailed for 6 years after 2 robberies, one involving a real firearm. In 2015, he was sentenced to nearly 5 years for using an imitation weapon. Now on license from that offense, he feared going back to prison. On February 21, 2019, Birmingham Crown Court sentenced him to 9 years in prison with a 3-year extended license. He was banned from driving for 16 years. The judge called him a serious danger to the public. Holly Burke had been a PCSO for just 14 months, based in Nichelles with the Washwood Heath team. She lived in Marston Green, Solihull, and was remembered as dedicated, kind, and always smiling. Her death shook the West Midlands Police. Hundreds of officers attended her funeral, where colleagues lined the entrance, gave a guard of honor, and shared stories of her warmth. Her family described her as someone who always put others first. Police leaders and community members spoke of the deep loss felt by all who knew her. Holly's life ended in a moment caused by reckless choices. A 14-minute chase over 12 miles, speeds over 100 miles per hour, and one life full of promise taken instantly. For her family, her colleagues, and the officers who tried to save her, January 22, 2019, will always remain a day of unbearable loss.